I rushed home to grab the contract and return to the office in time to sign the biggest deal of the year. But as soon as I opened the door, I froze at the sound of my husband sobbing. He was saying, "Dad, I got my secretary Kinsley 7 months pregnant. My wife doesn't know anything." His father said, "You've disgraced this entire family, Hunter. Be honest and apologize to your wife before things get worse." Right after that, my husband cried even louder and said something that made my whole body tremble. I could no longer stand. "My name is Michelle Barrett, 35 years old, top saleswoman at Lexus Detroit for 3 consecutive quarters." And I still remember that afternoon vividly. A clear Friday sky over Detroit. I came home earlier than usual, planning to retrieve the contract I had stayed up all night preparing, but forgot to bring in the morning rush. It was a major deal between our Lexus showroom and a renowned tech company downtown, who ordered 10 2025 Lexus LX 600S to reward their top employees. A deal I was proud of, one I had spent an entire quarter securing. I opened the door to our quiet 2-story home in the suburbs, intending to stay just a few minutes before returning to the office. But as soon as I stepped inside, I heard sobbing from the kitchen. The crying, it was strange, didn't sound like my husband Hunter. Hunter, 38 years old, CEO of Metro West Holdings, one of the fastest-growing real estate firms in the region. To the world, he was always confident, composed, never revealing emotion. But now, he was slumped over the kitchen table, on the phone with Joseph, his father, voice trembling, cracking like a child. "Dad, I got my assistant Kinsley 7 months pregnant. Michelle doesn't know anything." I froze in the doorway. Every word he said hit me like a punch to the chest. My breath caught, my palms went cold. All I could do was lean against the wall, afraid even to breathe in case he noticed me. On the other end of the line, my father-in-law's voice dropped, weary and full of disappointment. "You've disgraced this entire family, Hunter. Michelle is a good woman, you know that. End it with Kinsley and apologize to your wife before things get worse." But Hunter broke down harder, his voice shattering. "I can't. She's pregnant. And Michelle can't have kids with me." It felt like someone was squeezing my heart. So this so-called destiny of ours was just temporary pity. I had believed in his silences, thinking they held the pain of a man who almost died. But now, I saw it was just cowardice masked by tears. My father-in-law continued, his tone heavy. "Do you remember who stayed by your side during the 6 months you were in a coma? You drove drunk, and the doctors said you might never wake up. I advised Michelle to file for divorce, to take the chance to move to New York and become the director of Lexus New York. But Michelle, the very woman you're betraying, refused that career opportunity to stay and take care of you, day in and day out." At that moment, everything came flooding back. I saw myself 3 years ago, sitting by his hospital bed in that sterilized room, brewing coffee each morning, reading the financial news each night, just so he could get used to his wife's voice again. As the doctor said, it might help his recovery. I believed. And I waited. For 6 months straight, I held his hand and whispered, "I'm here." And when he opened his eyes, I thought it was a miracle. I didn't know that the day he woke up was also the day he began to drift away from me. Now, in that kitchen, the man I had saved was crying over another woman. I didn't say anything. I quietly stepped back, heart pounding in my chest. My mind scrambled through fragments of memory. Vague client dinner expenses, a photo at a downtown bar where he said he was meeting a VIP, and the second phone he always kept with him. Put together, they formed a brutally clear picture. I wasn't angry. I didn't scream. I just felt a hollow chill inside. I told myself, gather evidence first. React later. I knew I was walking into a battle, not to keep a husband, but to reclaim the truth. I grabbed my car keys and walked out the door. The evening wind swept across the red brick path leading to Maple and Steam, the little cafe I always visited when I needed to clear my mind. Warm yellow lights spilled onto the wooden tables. Mary Ann, the owner, a widow in her mid-60s, was wiping down the counter. She looked up and smiled. "Another long day at Lexus, sweetheart?" I nodded, hiding my tears, and whispered, "Longer than usual, Marianne." I chose my usual corner by the window, opened my laptop, and began searching. Private investigators in Detroit, divorce attorneys in Michigan, downtown apartment rental records. Every click was a new breath, a step in the plan I had just named in my mind. Father's Day exposure. I wouldn't cry, I wouldn't beg. I would expose him in front of everyone, on Father's Day itself, the day he proudly claimed to be the man of the family. I knew I had lost a husband, but I also knew it was time to reclaim myself. Outside, light rain tapped on the stone-paved sidewalk, reflecting the headlights from the main street. Inside me, there was no more pain, only clarity. I looked at my laptop screen, created a new folder, and typed, "Father's Day exposure." I would be silent no more. I would protect no one anymore. I would let him destroy himself with the very secrets he tried to bury. A scene played out in my mind. The Father's Day brunch at the country club. The family's usual gathering spot, with my father-in-law's smug smile, the clinking of glasses, and the warm wishes to the man of the family. I would choose that very day, that very hall, to reveal everything. I opened PowerPoint, created the first slide, white text on a black background. Father's Day exposure, the truth you tried to hide. The screen's glow reflected onto my face in the misted glass. A woman stared back. No longer the betrayed, but the one in control. I began listing financial evidence, photos, witnesses, timeline, location. Everything had to be indisputable. At the bottom, I typed a small note. No more silence. No more protection. Outside, wind chimes tinkled softly against each other. I sipped the bitter coffee, then shut my laptop, feeling as though I had just signed my own declaration of freedom. This Father's Day would no longer be theirs. It would be the day of truth. The next morning, as the first light of sun streamed through the curtains, I sat at the dining table and opened the laptop Hunter and I used to manage our work. He had already left the house early, as usual, tie neatly adjusted, his familiar cologne still lingering in the air, and his usual brief farewell as he stepped out the door. "I've got a meeting downtown, might be home late." As the door closed, the house fell into such silence I could hear Cooper's steady breathing under the table. I opened the laptop that Hunter and I often used together for business tracking. He thought I never touched the expense records of his company, but I used to help him go over major transactions, car purchases, advertising costs, and client entertainment. I understood how every dollar flowed, how each category aligned with its expenses. I logged into the expense management account his company used. Everything looked normal until I scrolled down to the recent expenditures. One payment caught my eye. $4,950. Rental payment, Midtown Towers. I froze. Midtown Towers was a high-end apartment complex right across from his office downtown. I kept scrolling. $2,800. Medical clinic, IOASH, prenatal services. Then another transaction, $1,200. Café Lumina, event catering. My heart began to race. When I added it all up, the total exceeded $138,000, far too much to be just business expenses. Yet every invoice had been charged to the company credit card, one that only Hunter had access to. I understood immediately what was happening. He was using company funds to support that woman, from her apartment to her OB/GYN to even her baby shower. He was building a second life with corporate money, right in the heart of the city, while coming home to me every night, lying that he was working late on a big project. I hit print, and page after page emerged from the printer with the cold, mechanical sound of judgment. Every line item, every transaction was a razor-sharp slice of truth. I placed everything into a brown file folder, hand-labeled, Business Misuse, Evidence. As I sealed the folder, I felt an odd, steady calm settle over me. If he could lie with money, I would unveil the truth with proof drawn from those very dollars. I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the laptop screen, and one name floated through my mind: Kinsley. I needed to know who she really was, where she lived, and just how deep her role ran in this story. If those payments tied back to her name, then the next proof would surely be found wherever she appeared. That afternoon, I drove through the city center, my heart pounding every time I passed a street Hunter had claimed to be meeting with clients. I turned down the road opposite Hunter Development Group, the one lined with upscale apartments I had just seen listed in the financial records. I parked on the curb, pretending to check my phone. And then I saw her, Kinsley, the intern secretary I'd met once at his company's year-end party, a young woman with glimmering blue eyes and a smile that would make any married man look twice. I remembered clearly how Hunter had introduced her to me, with pride in his voice. "She's the fastest learner in the department." I even smiled politely back then. Thinking of that now, that smile feels idiotic. Kinsley sat outside a cafe near the apartment building, wearing a light blue dress that clung gently to the figure of someone 7 months pregnant. She smiled as she rubbed her belly, chatting on the phone. Probably with him. It all unfolded in broad daylight, right before my eyes, as if there was nothing to hide. I didn't need to hear a single word. That scene alone confirmed everything I had suspected. I took out my phone and quietly snapped a few photos from inside the car, all in public spaces: the street, the cafe, the building's facade. Perfectly legal. My lens caught the moment Kinsley looked up toward Hunter's office, her gaze soft and unbothered, so serene it made my skin crawl. I saved the photos and labeled them Midtown Towers, 12:17 p.m. The evidence now wasn't just on paper. It was alive, breathing, and smiling out there. I started the car and drove off slowly, a chill clarity spreading through me. I didn't head straight home. I turned toward the small park by Lafayette Lake, where maple trees were beginning to cast long shadows over the water. I sat on an old wooden bench, watching children play tag, a heaviness pressing down on me. Memories surged. Those quiet afternoons when the two of us would sit in this very park, Hunter feeding Cooper ice cream, while I laughed until tears came as the dog got cream all over his nose. Back then, Hunter looked at me with gentle eyes and said, "I don't need anything else but you." I believed that, purely, completely, and now, foolishly. I used to look forward to coming home early, cooking dinner myself, picking the wine, listening to him talk about new deals. I used to find joy in little things like that. But now, the thought of going home and seeing him, the man who had lied to me for months, made me nauseous. I sat there for a long time, watching as the sunset dyed the lake red. The pain no longer surged. It simmered, slow and cold, more cutting than any tear. When the sun disappeared behind distant buildings, I took a deep breath and stood up. I knew I had to stay calm, had to play the role of the wife who knew nothing, until the truth was unveiled on Father's Day. I drove home in the late afternoon, cool lake wind streaming through the window. Everything around me was unchanged. Mrs. Helen trimming the lawn, kids cycling in the street, and our 2-story house still as peaceful as if it weren't harboring a storm. I pulled into the garage, fixed my expression in the mirror, before stepping inside. Nothing could give me away. Hunter was already home, shirt still crisp, familiar scent of cologne lingering in the kitchen. He asked like nothing had happened. "How was your day? Sell any LX 600s?" I smiled, my voice calm. So calm it surprised even me. 3. Seems like everyone's leaning toward pearl white over black. He chuckled, poured wine, and talked about his upcoming project. I responded just enough, like any wife chatting with her husband at dinner. Except I knew every word from him was a lie. When he got up to clear the plates, I watched his back and felt like I was observing a stranger. On the table, Cooper looked up at me, his deep brown eyes full of something that felt like understanding. He gently nudged his head against my leg, then lay down with a quiet sigh. I reached down, stroked his head, and whispered softly, "Good boy. Stay silent like mommy, okay?" The mask had been perfectly placed. A quiet dinner, a fake smile, and a plan growing steadily inside me, hour by hour, minute by minute. That night, after Hunter had fallen asleep, his breathing slow and even in the dark room, I lay still beside him, phone lit beneath the covers. I messaged Ryan Cooper, an old friend from our days in community service, now a Detroit cop. The text was short. "Ryan, I need a reliable private investigator." "Personal matter?" "Very discreet." A few minutes later, he replied, "There's someone. Used to work for a big insurance firm. Very good. Name's Marcus Flynn. I'll have him contact you." I stared at the glowing screen in the dark, feeling as if I had flipped a switch I could never turn off again. I put the phone down, turned toward Hunter, sleeping soundly, like a man who'd never betrayed anything. The glow from the nightstand clock cast a faint light on his face, and in that moment, I realized I was a stranger to the man lying next to me. The next morning, I returned to Maple and Steam, the place where every major decision of mine seemed to begin. The Detroit sky was overcast, and soft rain fell on the cafe's wooden awning. I ordered a black Americano, sat in my usual window corner. At exactly 8:30, the door opened. A tall man in a brown leather coat walked in, eyes sharp with the precision of someone used to studying details. "Ms. Barrett?" he asked, voice low and firm. "Yes," I said, standing to shake his hand. "Marcus Flynn," he introduced himself. "Used to be with Michigan Mutual Insurance. I work independently now. Ryan from Detroit PD sent me." I nodded. "I need you to verify some things, quietly and within legal boundaries." I slid a white envelope across the table, $4,000 in retainer cash. Marcus glanced at it and gave a small nod. He didn't ask much, just said, "Give me 3 days. I'll know exactly who Kinsley is, when she and your husband started, and whether she even knows she's wrecking someone's home." I looked at him, catching the calm gaze of a man who'd seen too many betrayals. I said quietly, "I don't want to harm her unborn children. I just want discrete evidence." Marcus stood, buttoned his coat. "I understand. She won't know the wife of the father of her babies is investigating her." 3 days later, I received an email from him. "Investigation results. Confidential." I opened the file. Each line felt like a cut to the chest. Kinsley, 23 years old, intern at Hunter's company, set to become full-time after graduation. Believes Hunter is separated and planning to marry her. 7 months pregnant with twins, fully supported by him. Housing, medical, living expenses at Midtown Towers. I read it 3 times, then closed the laptop. Strangely, I didn't cry. Maybe because the tears had dried long ago. Only numbness remained. That evening, we had dinner under familiar golden lights. Hunter spoke of shareholder meetings and expansion plans. I nodded, smiled, responded like I was still the trusting wife. Beneath the table, Cooper curled at my feet, occasionally licking my hand as if he could sense I was holding myself together, barely. I stared at the glass of red wine before me, thinking of the man named Marcus Flynn, the first person in years to tell me, "You're not crazy, you're just more awake than the people around you." 30 minutes later, as I was clearing the dishes, my phone buzzed on the table. A message appeared. From James, Hunter's longtime best friend, and the groomsmen at our wedding. "Meet me privately." "Don't tell Hunter." I stared at the text, my heart tightening. In the past, James was the type who always defended Hunter, even when he was wrong. If he was reaching out now, something serious had happened. I replied simply, "Tomorrow morning." Maple and Steam. The next morning, I arrived early. The air was damp and cool, the wind chimes on the awning ringing softly each time the door opened. I sat in the same corner where I had met Marcus just days ago. A short while later, James walked in. He looked tired and conflicted. His shirt was wrinkled, eyes shadowed, as if sleep had eluded him all night. He sat down without meeting my eyes. "Michelle," he said softly, "I owe you an apology." I said nothing, waiting in silence. James sighed, setting down his coffee. At my birthday last week, the old gang was there. Hunter drank too much. And while drunk, he said something I can't forget. I looked up at him, my gaze pushing him to continue. He said, "Michelle can't have kids, so I'm letting Kinsley have them for us." That sentence left me paralyzed. Even though I had already suspected, hearing it confirmed from someone else felt like a knife driven into my heart. James went on, voice shaking. "My wife heard it. She got furious, told me if I stayed friends with Hunter, she'd leave me. I stayed quiet for days, but the more I thought about it, the more disgusted I became. He's crossed a line. I can't ignore it anymore." I looked at him for a long time, then said quietly but firmly, "Thank you, James. You don't need to say more. I'll handle it from here." He stood up, ready to leave. "Just be careful, Michelle. He's not the kind of man who goes down easy." I smiled. A cold, calm smile that surprised even me. "It's all right," I said. "I don't need him to go down. I just need the truth to win." When James left, I stayed seated, watching the last drops of coffee swirl in my cup. Outside, Detroit remained noisy and indifferent, unaware that a single sentence had just ended a marriage. I pulled out my phone, saved James's message as verbal testimony, and filed it away. The puzzle was coming together, and I knew the moment of reckoning was drawing near. That night, the air in Detroit was cool after the rain. I took Cooper for a walk around the neighborhood later than usual, hands in the pockets of a light jacket, my mind tangled in overlapping thoughts. As I passed the small house of Mrs. Helen Crawford, our elderly neighbor, who lived alone on Maple Street, she was watering hydrangeas on her porch. "Working late again, dear?" she asked, her voice warm and raspy with age. I smiled, masking my weariness behind the same familiar smile. "Yes, ma'am. It's a busy season at Lexus." She nodded, her kind eyes sensing something more. "Don't forget to eat. Strong women still need to take care of themselves." I thanked her and moved on, walking under the long shadows cast by the maple trees. When I returned home, Hunter had texted, "Working late downtown." The same old lie. I hung up my jacket, poured myself a small glass of wine, and opened my laptop. If he could build an entire narrative to hide the truth, then I would write its true version. I created an anonymous email account using a neutral name and posed as a contributor for a blog about women and professional life. The subject line was simple: "Interview request for intern on professional experience." The recipient: Kinsley Adams, the intern secretary at Hunter Development Group. It took me nearly 10 minutes to draft the message, friendly and casual enough to convince her it was a chance to be featured in an inspiring article. When I hit send, I inhaled deeply, my heart racing. Not from fear, but because for the first time, I was the one controlling the game. A little after 10 p.m., my inbox pinged. I opened the reply, and the words made my hand tremble. "Hi, I'd be happy to share. I'm currently interning at Hunter Development Group. He's a great, kind man. He said he's separated, just waiting for the paperwork to marry me. I know he has an ex-wife, but he told me she only cares about her job and that there's no love left. I think I'll help him find happiness again." I read it over and over, lips pressed tightly. That innocent message was the most damning proof yet, not just of betrayal, but of the manipulative lies Hunter had planted in someone else's mind. I saved the email, took screenshots, backed up copies to a secondary account. Then I sat motionless before the screen, watching the cursor blink like my own heartbeat, steady, cold, and devoid of emotion. At exactly 11:36 p.m., my phone lit up. A message from Hunter. "Good night," Miss You sent from downtown Detroit. His location pinged precisely at Midtown Towers. I didn't reply. I just stared at it, fingers tightening around the phone. My world may have been falling apart, but in that moment, I knew I was standing in the right place, on the side of truth. I turned off the lights, climbed into bed, and Cooper jumped up beside me, resting his head on my leg. Outside, the gentle patter of midnight rain on the roof sounded like the opening notes of a storm fast approaching. The next morning, the house was unusually quiet. I sat at my desk in the study, in front of my laptop, the file folder, and every image I had collected. What I felt wasn't pain or panic anymore. It was laser focus, as though I were preparing for the most important presentation of my life. I opened PowerPoint and finalized the Father's Day slideshow. On the screen, I inserted our wedding photo, an afternoon in the garden of our two-story home, me in a white dress, his hand in mine, eyes filled with a happiness that now felt bitterly fake. The next slide, I added screenshots of company account statements, the text clear. Payment, Midtown Towers, $4,950. Prenatal services, $2,800. Catering, $1,200. At the bottom, I typed in a note. Total, $138,000. Then came the email from Kinsley, written with innocent trust during our fake interview. He said he's finalizing his divorce and will marry me once it's done. I just want him to be happy. I stared at that line. Nothing is more brutal than a liar convincing someone their betrayal is an act of love. And finally, I inserted the photo of Hunter holding Kinsley on the balcony of Midtown Towers, taken by Detective Marcus Flynn with a long-range lens from a building across the street. The evening light glinted off the glass, but you could still clearly see his hand on her shoulder, his head tilted down, the tender smile I once believed was meant only for me. Each slide was a shard of truth, cold, precise, undeniable. I titled the presentation boldly, Father's Day Exposure, The Truth Behind the Perfect Family. I saved the entire file to a USB drive, slipped it into an envelope labeled, Private, Do Not Open Until Father's Day Brunch. It felt like I was stepping into the final stage of an investigation, where I was both the victim and the witness. That evening, when Hunter came home, he set his briefcase on the table, loosened his tie, and smiled. Just had a meeting with Dad. This year he wants to do Father's Day at the country club. Don't wear black, okay? The family likes brighter colors for photos. I looked up at him, my voice light and almost indifferent. I've already prepared. He raised an eyebrow, grinning. Prepared what? I smiled faintly, eyes never leaving the glowing laptop screen. A presentation you'll never forget. He laughed, thinking I was joking, and headed upstairs. And I simply watched his shadow fade up the staircase, feeling a stillness inside me so eerie it was almost serene. A storm was coming, and this time, I would be the one who controlled it. Father's Day arrived faster than I expected. That morning, Detroit basked in golden sunlight beneath a clear blue sky. Luxury cars lined up outside Bloomfield Hills Country Club, where Hunter's family hosted their annual brunch. I checked my reflection one last time before leaving the house. A bold, flame-orange jumpsuit, gold heels, red lipstick. Not the subdued wife of a CEO, but the version of myself from before he ever entered my life. A woman who knew her worth, with nothing left to lose. In my clutch bag, the USB containing the presentation rested beside my lipstick. I had hired a photographer and videographer in advance, under the pretense of capturing a family celebration. But in my mind, everything had been calculated. Every frame, every word, every reaction would be recorded as evidence. The country club's grand hall was exquisitely decorated. Cream gold tablecloths, white lilies, a soft jazz band playing in the corner. Over 36 guests were present, relatives, friends, business partners. Everyone dressed elegantly, laughing and chatting. I walked in like a splash of color against the neutral backdrop, drawing glances from all directions. Hunter saw me from across the room and paused slightly. As I approached, he forced a smile and said under his breath, "You look different today." I smiled calmly. Yes. I just decided to wear something I used to love. Before I became the wife of a CEO, he chuckled awkwardly, his hand lightly touching my back, lowering his voice. Dad wants me to give the opening speech. Just stand next to me, all right? I nodded, leaning in to whisper, Don't worry, I'll be right there. I just have a few words of my own. He hesitated, his eyes flickering with suspicion, but then he smiled tightly and walked away. At exactly noon, the brunch began. My father-in-law stood up, voice booming across the elegant room. "Thank you all for joining us this Father's Day. Our family has always been built on trust, honesty, and love." I smiled faintly. Trust, honesty, love. Such expensive words, and today I would return them to their true meaning. As he finished speaking, I stood up, my voice soft but clear. "Excuse me, may I have a few minutes? I have a little presentation for my husband, and for the family." The room fell silent. Hunter frowned. "Michelle, right now?" I nodded, inserted the USB into the projector. The large screen behind the podium lit up. First slide, our wedding photo in the garden of our 2-story home. Me in a white dress, him holding my hand, the smile now painfully false. Next slide, a photo of Hunter holding pregnant Kinsley on the balcony of the Midtown Towers apartment, taken by Marcus Flynn. Whispers rippled through the room. I clicked forward. Slide 3, company account statements showing $138,000 in expenses. Apartment rent, prenatal care, baby shower catering. Slide 4, screenshot of Kinsley's email, the text crystal clear. "He said he's finalizing the divorce and will marry me once it's done." The air thickened. I could hear someone drop a wine glass. And then the final slide, a quote from Marcus's investigation, relayed by James, Hunter's best friend. "Michelle can't have kids, so I let Kinsley have them for us." The room froze. All eyes turned from the screen to Hunter, pale, trembling, his fingers gripping his wine glass. I turned back, voice steady and cold. "This is the man you all call a family role model. This is how he defines honesty and love." In the bottom corner of the slide, a note appeared. "All images and documents collected from public or legally accessible sources. No violation of privacy." My father-in-law rose, his voice cracking. I knew, but I didn't have the courage to speak. "I'm sorry, Michelle." That was the breaking point. Chaos erupted, shouts, chairs scraping, some guests leaving, others filming, snapping photos. Hunter stood frozen, his eyes glassy, not with guilt, but fear. I took off my wedding ring and dropped it into the half-full glass of wine in front of him. "My lawyer will contact you regarding the divorce and the division of 50% of your assets. I'll be suing the company for misuse of corporate funds to support a mistress." I gently tapped the edge of the table with my glass. "Happy Father's Day, Hunter." I turned and walked away. Behind me were shouts, voices calling my name, the sound of my father-in-law's sigh collapsing into defeat. But I didn't look back. I left the country club while the event was still in chaos. The Detroit sky had turned gray, heavy clouds gathering as if mirroring the mood of those left behind. I walked quickly to the car, kicked off my heels, tossed them onto the passenger seat, and started the engine. This drive had no music, no words, only the wind howling through the window. I drove straight to Midtown Towers, the apartment where Kinsley lived, the same place Hunter had been financially supporting for 7 months. When I arrived, I turned off the engine, inhaled deeply, and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My makeup remained flawless, but the eyes were different. No longer those of the betrayed, but of someone ready to close a chapter. I stepped into the lobby, the scent of perfume and the sound of high heels echoing off the marble floor. The security guard nodded, assuming I was visiting a resident, and asked simply, "Who are you visiting, ma'am?" I replied, "Kinsley Adams, Unit 24B. He checked the list and nodded me through. As the elevator doors opened, I saw Kinsley standing at the reception counter, smoothie in hand. Her eyes widened in surprise, then confusion as I approached. "You're Kinsley Adams, correct?" I asked softly. She froze, nodded, her voice shaky. "Yes." "And you are?" I smiled, my gaze unwavering, enough for her to understand. "Hunter Barrett's legal wife." Kinsley's face went pale, her hand trembling so much she nearly dropped her drink. No, no way. He said he was divorcing. I I didn't even know you existed. I nodded slightly, my voice calm, as if discussing the weather. He told me the opposite, that you were just a little too friendly for an intern. The air in the lobby thickened. An elderly couple entering the building glanced our way, then quietly walked past. I motioned for Kinsley to sit on the nearby sofa. She hesitated, then obeyed. I opened my laptop and placed it on the coffee table in front of her. The screen lit up with familiar slides: apartment photos, company statements, the email she sent, and the photo of Hunter holding her on the balcony. Kinsley raised a hand to her mouth, eyes welling with tears. She shook her head, voice breaking. I didn't know. He said his wife was cold, only cared about work. I really believed he was lonely. I looked at her, not with anger, just clarity. She was a young woman pulled into a web of lies I once lived inside. I spoke softly, my tone gentler now. You're not the one at fault, Kinsley. The lies or tears streamed down her cheeks. She lowered her head and whispered, I'm sorry, Mrs. Barrett. I'll leave. I don't want to be part of this anymore. I closed the laptop, stood up, and nodded. No need to apologize. Just remember, never let anyone make you believe that deceit is love. I turned and walked away, the sound of my heels echoing steadily across the tiled floor. Behind me, Kinsley remained seated, one hand on her belly, tears falling silently. Outside, cold wind from the Detroit River swept across the wet pavement. I looked up at the sky. The storm had passed, but its echo would remain. And in my heart, I knew. My battle wasn't over, it had only just begun. 3 months after Father's Day, summer in Detroit blazed brightly, and the lives of everyone in that story had completely changed. Hunter was forced to resign as CEO by the board, after an internal audit confirmed he had used company funds for personal expenses, including the $138,000 transferred to the Midtown Towers apartment rented for Kinsley. He lost executive control, his reputation crumbled, his shares were frozen, and now he lived quietly in a small apartment downtown. Each month, he was required by Michigan Civil Court to send financial support to both me and Kinsley. My father-in-law, once regarded as the moral pillar of the family, was now shunned by extended relatives. Board members refused to meet with him, and the once grand family dinners in Bloomfield were now attended by a few empty chairs. As for me, I kept the 2-story house in Cooper, thanks to my lawyer proving they were my separate assets purchased before marriage, using my savings and inheritance from my grandmother, notarized in 2014. That house, once filled with silent tears, had become a symbol of renewal. My career at Lexus also shifted after the media picked up the story. I was no longer Michelle, the woman betrayed by her husband, but Michelle Barrett, the one who stood up. The Midwest Regional Board invited me to speak at an internal conference on female strength in the auto industry. My sales doubled, and co-workers jokingly dubbed me Queen of Lexus Detroit. One early fall afternoon, as sunlight slanted through the showroom glass, a middle-aged woman arrived to pick up her new car. Holding the contract, she gave me a sad smile. My husband just left me. After 22 years of marriage, he said he wanted to start over. I placed my hand gently on her shoulder and replied, I know that feeling. But you'll get through it, because women like us always find a way to steer forward, even when the road changes. She laughed, eyes glistening. That evening, I sat in the living room with Cooper, opened my laptop, and posted my first public status since everything happened. 7 years of infertility was never my fault. Loyalty doesn't deserve betrayal. The post spread quickly. By morning, I had hundreds of messages from women everywhere: Detroit, Chicago, Texas, Oregon, sharing stories they thought only they had suffered. I read each one, then decided to start a support group called No More Silence, a small online community where women could share, learn emotional self-defense, and rebuild trust after betrayal. I began posting short videos on social media, sharing lessons I'd learned, from how to stay calm when uncovering the truth, to how to stand tall in a divorce hearing. My story didn't end there. One day, the producer of the popular YouTube podcast Stories of Us reached out. They wanted me to share my journey in a special episode about women's courage. The title, She Exposed Her Husband on Father's Day. Within 72 hours of airing on YouTube and Spotify, it had over 200,000 listens. People online called me an icon of honesty and the woman who made truth fashionable. A week later, I was invited for a live interview on Detroit's local news channel. On camera, I didn't tremble. I looked directly into the lens and spoke slowly, every word clear. I don't want to be seen as a victim. Silence is not strength. The studio lights reflected off my hair, and I knew. I was no longer the woman I once was. 1 week after the broadcast, Marcus Flynn, the private investigator, called me. His voice was low and tired. "Michelle, I've got a new client. She found out her husband's cheating with 3 interns. She needs advice more than evidence. I want you to help her." I looked down at Cooper, curled by my feet, and smiled gently. "Send her my way. Maybe it's time I help someone else rise, like I once did." I softly closed the laptop, sunset light pouring through the windows. The storm had passed, and from the wreckage of truth, a new beginning was taking shape, peaceful, grounded, and radiant. One quiet weekend afternoon, as sunlight stretched across the wooden floor through the window, I decided to clear out the back storage room, a small space filled with old cardboard boxes, once holding memories of me and Hunter. The smell of dusty wood and dried lavender made it feel like I was sorting through layers of my own past. I opened each box, organizing documents, photos, and keepsakes I once cherished. At the bottom of an old wooden box, I found a small yellowed envelope, handwritten in my mother's familiar script. Inside was a neatly folded paper, her handwriting tilted and careful. "When someone lies to you with tears, don't comfort them. Wipe your own." I read it over and over, hearing her voice in my mind, gentle but firm. My tears fell, not from sorrow, but from release. I framed the note in a small wooden frame and hung it on the living room wall, right beside the photo of Cooper and my mother. I wanted those words to greet me every morning, a reminder that true strength doesn't come from enduring, but from choosing to dry your own tears. A year later, Detroit in early spring was clear and hopeful. I returned to St. Anne Parish, the church I once attended with my in-laws. Back then, I always sat in the back, nodding quietly as others praised the sacrifice of a good wife. But today, I walked in wearing flats, carrying a small notebook. No longer a woman hiding tears behind smiles, I came as someone who now knew her worth. That day was Women's Sunday, when women shared real stories. When the host invited volunteers, I stood, took a deep breath, and looked around the room. "I used to think forgiveness meant letting them come back," I began calmly. But I was wrong. Forgiveness isn't about return. It's about moving forward, without the weight. The room was silent for a moment, then someone clapped, then another, and then the whole church rose, applause echoing beneath the old stone arches. I smiled. No bitterness, no blame, only the peace of someone who had weathered a storm, and was grateful to still be standing, still believing in her own goodness. After the church service, I realized something. Silence only allows harm to survive, while truth, when shared rightly, can heal both the speaker and the listener. So I started a small talk show called The Truth Table at Maple and Steam, the very cafe where it all began, where I first sat when I discovered Hunter's betrayal and vowed never to stay silent again. The first session had 6 women seated around a round wooden table. Each brought a story, a wound. No script, no stage lights, just coffee, tears, and laughter. I didn't call it a show, I called it honest therapy. Every week, new faces joined. A 25-year-old woman who just left a toxic marriage. A 60-year-old mother after 3 decades of silence. A young student who said she watched my video on Stories of Us and chose not to return to her abusive boyfriend. Every story was a piece of courage, and I sat among them, not as a teacher, but as someone who once fell and now helps others rise. One afternoon, just as the session ended, Mrs. Helen Crawford, my elderly neighbor, walked in wearing a gray cardigan, holding a golden baked apple pie, its sweet aroma filling the room. "Welcome back to real life," she said, placing it on the table. I stepped forward and hugged her. Tears welled up again, but this time not from pain, from gratitude, that I hadn't only reclaimed myself, but found a community of sincerity. Cooper darted around the table, his golden tail wagging, his paws tapping across the wooden floor. Some women laughed, others pulled out their phones to capture the moment. Laughter rang out in the cafe, mingling with the scent of roasted coffee and warm pie, like someone had flung open the window to let sunlight pour in after a long storm. I sat down, sipping coffee, looking around. Smiling faces, eyes no longer afraid. And I realized this was the true reward of it all, not the takedown of a liar, but the rebirth of wounded souls learning to tell their stories without trembling. One spring morning, soft golden sunlight streamed through the curtains, landing on the kitchen counter where Cooper lay dozing. I was making coffee when the phone rang. The screen showed Mrs. Sanders, a former client who'd bought a Lexus LX from me 2 years earlier. I answered, her voice trembling. "Michelle, I heard your story on the podcast. I'm going through the same. My husband's cheating with someone at work, and I don't know where to start." I leaned against the counter, looking out at tulips blooming in the yard, and gently said, "You don't have to be strong today. Just be honest with yourself. The rest will become clearer." Silence on the line, then a soft sigh, like a burden released. I smiled, knowing even one sentence can be the start of someone else's healing, just like mine began on a tearful afternoon. Days later, under Detroit's blue skies and cool lake breeze, I opened the door to my new Lexus RX 350, a gift from the company after I became Queen of Lexus Detroit. Cooper jumped into the passenger seat, resting his head on the window, brown eyes sparkling in the sun. I drove out of the neighborhood, along Jefferson Avenue's Lakeside Road, then toward Belle Isle Bridge, where I once walked Cooper during my loneliest days. The view hadn't changed, but everything else had. Wind tousled my hair, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. I turned on the radio. "Rise Again" began to play. Soft guitar, a warm, husky female voice. I smiled. My own voiceover played, gentle but steady. "He lost everything because of lies. I found everything because of the truth." On the bridge, sunlight shimmered across the water, like a path to the future. Cooper tilted his head, barked softly, as if agreeing. I reached out to stroke him, a wave of peace washing over me. In the distance, the city of Detroit glowed in the morning sun. Glass towers reflecting blue skies, bridges connecting two sides. Proof that from what's broken, we can rebuild. Stronger, brighter, and more real. As the car crossed the bridge, the imaginary camera pulled back. Glistening water, clear skies, wind blowing through my golden hair. The screen faded to black. Across a sunlit Detroit skyline, these words appeared. "Some women burn bridges. Others build new cities." The music faded. Only the wind and a steady heartbeat remained. The story closed, not with revenge, but with freedom. If you've ever faced betrayal, know this. Silence won't save you. Truth will set you free. Share your story. Tell the world women are not weak or emotional. We are stronger and wiser than they imagine. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to join me for more courageous journeys. Stories not only of pain, but of power and rebirth. After the animal rescue mission from the California wildfire, I flew home earlier than planned, without telling my husband, to cook an anniversary dinner for our 8th wedding year. I tiptoed step by step toward the living room window, only to suddenly hear my husband's best friend's young child call him Daddy. while the child's mother kissed my husband and said, "Michael, you really are a wonderful father." That scene left me frozen in place. They were celebrating the birthday of a child unrelated to me, in the very house I paid for. I quietly recorded a video and left. The next morning, my husband came to my workplace and yelled, "What horrible things you did last night." My name is Michelle, 35 years old, a veterinarian and owner of Harbor Light Animal Clinic in Cambridge, Boston. After nearly 3 consecutive weeks in California, helping rescue animals injured in the wildfires, the mission ended 3 days earlier than expected, and I decided to fly home that very afternoon. I booked a noon flight from San Francisco to Boston, set to arrive early in the evening. I wanted to be home before Michael could find out, to prepare dinner for our 8th wedding anniversary. I paid extra to upgrade to business class, just to come home a bit sooner, just to see his smile when I stepped through the door with a small gift in hand. Throughout the flight, I thought of him, of his favorite dinner, the red stew I learned to cook just for him, of the burgundy bottle we'd been saving for a special occasion. I pictured him opening the door, surprised, then smiling. In my suitcase was a special gift, a silver necklace engraved with a wolf's paw, symbolizing loyalty, which I picked out after a successful surgery on an injured old dog in California. I believed it would be the perfect gift for a perfect anniversary. But life is rarely as perfect as we imagine. When the Uber dropped me off in front of our quiet neighborhood in Cambridge, I saw a silver sedan parked outside the house. That car, disturbingly familiar. I looked through the window and felt my chest tighten. It was Tiffany's Honda, Michael's close colleague and friend, a 3rd-grade teacher at the nearby elementary school. I remembered clearly, just yesterday morning, Tiffany had posted on Instagram that she'd be attending a 3-day teacher conference in Worcester. So why was she here, while I hadn't even returned home yet? A cold intuition made me ask the driver to drop me off at the end of the street. I quietly walked to the house, carrying the small gift box. The closer I got, the clearer the voices and laughter from inside became. Warm, intimate, familiar, but not meant for me. Through the slightly open door, I saw Michael blowing out candles with a little girl. The child called him Daddy, in a voice so innocent and bright, and he smiled, lifted her into his arms, kissed her hair, and said in that sweet voice I once believed was meant only for me, "Daddy's here, sweetheart." I stood frozen. The air around me felt frozen too. The gift box nearly slipped from my hand. I caught it with the other. I saw Tiffany, in a light blue floral dress, standing next to him, her gaze tender and intimate in a way that needed no explanation. On the table was a birthday cake with the words, "Happy Birthday, Lisa." And Lisa was Tiffany's 3-year-old daughter, the one I'd once noted had the same blue eyes as my husband. I used to think they were just close friends, that Michael was only helping Tiffany because she was a single mom. But now, hearing Daddy again, I understood everything. That child was calling my husband her father. I stepped back, then again, trying not to let anyone hear my broken breathing. I turned and hurried to the gate, heart pounding like it would explode. I don't remember calling the Uber, only that I sat inside it, headed to my clinic, moving on instinct. When I arrived, I sat in silence in the empty room. The white light reflected on the walls. The sterilizer machine hummed steadily, like the heartbeat of someone barely alive. I opened my phone, went on Facebook, scrolled through Tiffany's posts. There were photos of Lisa learning to talk. Tiffany wrote, "She just said, 'Mama!'" "She's so adorable beneath it," Michael had commented. "She's adorable like her mom." I had once scrolled past it without a hint of doubt. Now, all the pieces fit. Looking back at the timeline, I realized Lisa was born 4 years ago. The same time Michael often came home late, sometimes 1 or 2 in the morning, sometimes not at all, texting, "Tiffany's not okay. She just broke up. I'm afraid she might do something reckless." I used to think he was kind, compassionate. I was touched by my husband's empathy, but perhaps back then, kindness had already become betrayal. I once believed our marriage was built on honesty, but now I see Michael had betrayed me with the woman he called his best friend. I don't hate Tiffany the way I hate him. To me, she's just a lonely woman who went too far. But Michael, the man I once called my soulmate, he's the one who stabbed me with the very trust I gave him. I opened the notebook on my desk. The first page still had a list of vaccines for cats. I turned to a new page, picked up my pen, and wrote the first line. If loyalty had a shape, then today it shattered. I looked up, out the window where the early winter rain had started to fall. In that moment, I knew I would not let this pain pass like a memory. I would strike back, and I would reclaim justice for myself. Out there, Boston's lights were flickering on, but inside me, nothing was clear. I knew I had just witnessed something unforgivable, but I couldn't let him know I knew. I needed the truth, needed evidence, not just emotions. I picked up my phone, opened the chat with Michael, and tried to sound as normal as possible. The rescue ended earlier than expected, but I might have to stay a few more days to wrap things up. If I finish early, I'll catch the red-eye flight home, message sent. My heart thudded. Just 15 seconds later, he replied, "That's great news. I miss you so much. Once you've rested, let's do a belated anniversary dinner." I looked at the screen, a bitter smile creeping onto my face. He was still playing the perfect husband, as if last night he hadn't laughed with another child in this very house. The next morning, I returned home in silence. Michael had already left. On the kitchen counter were 2 mugs, his usual coffee, and another with a faint lipstick mark. I looked around. Nothing was messy. Everything was too perfect, too clean, like my life had been erased from it. I opened the drawer where he usually kept his wallet and car keys. A small piece of paper stuck out. I pulled it free. A folded receipt. Teddy's Toy Emporium, white wool stuffed teddy bear, $127, September 12th. September 12th. He had told me he was in New York meeting investors. I remember he video called me, smiling, saying, "I miss you." My hand shook. There was no more doubt. I sat down, opened my laptop. The screen cast a cold blue light on my face. I created a new document, typed 3 words in all caps, "Justice Plan." I snapped a photo of the receipt, saved it into the first folder, named Day of Betrayal 1. Then I opened my notes and listed every detail. Tiffany's license plate, Michael's work hours, the late-night meetings he claimed were urgent. One by one, the puzzle pieces began falling into place. At 10:55 a.m., a loyal client came in with her elderly cat, Mrs. Whitmore, a retired lawyer I deeply respect. As I administered the shot, she looked at me and said softly but firmly, "My dear, your eyes say more than you realize. Something's wrong, isn't it?" I smiled, trying to cover it up. "No, just a bit tired." She nodded slowly and said, "Women only say tired when they're holding it all in. If you suspect someone, don't confront them without proof. Justice always sides with the patient." I stuck to the plan, not letting him know I was in Boston. At 3 p.m., just after finishing a minor surgery at the clinic, I texted Michael, keeping the tone of a wife still far away. "I'm wrapping up paperwork here in California. Might be a late one. How have things been at home?" He called back immediately. His voice was warm and familiar, so much so that if I hadn't known better, I might have believed him again. "Everything's fine. Don't worry about a thing. I've just been busy with work stuff. Oh, and I stopped by Tiffany's last night. She's not doing great again." I gripped the phone tightly. Last night was the night I stood outside the door, hearing a child call him Daddy. 1,000 questions burned in my throat, but I swallowed them down, letting out only a measured touch. "You and Tiffany. Is there something going on that makes you go over there so often?" He paused for a beat, then let out a perfectly crafted sigh, laced with wounded sincerity. "Are you doubting me, Michelle? You know Tiffany once had suicidal thoughts after her breakup. I just don't want her doing anything drastic. I thought you understood my heart." I let the silence linger, listening to the low hum of the air conditioner through the line like it was reminding me to stay calm. Then I spoke, slow and dry. "I'm not doubting. I'm just asking. If you're truly just helping, then that's good. Thank you for trusting me," he said softly. "Come home. We'll talk things through. I love you." The call ended. I stared at the dark screen, my chest tight and hollow. Was I angry? Yes. But more terrifying was that I no longer wanted to argue. Not yet. Not without proof. That night, alone in the clinic office, I opened our joint bank app and reviewed recent transactions. The words appeared like a black ink stain. Transfer, $2,000. Recipient, Tiffany M. Note: Take care, birthday. 2041. I leaned back in my chair, hearing my heartbeat in every harsh thud. 8:41 p.m. Right after that call with me, he sent her money, with a note that read, "Take care." I screenshot the transfer and saved it to the Justice Plan folder. Transfer 2000 Tiffany 2041 PNG. I reopened the photo of Tiffany's silver car outside the house and added it to the evidence log. The pieces were falling into place. I searched my contacts for Mildred Harper, divorce attorney, a former client who once brought in her beagle for vaccines. I typed a quick email, attaching the teddy bear receipt and the screenshot. "Dear Mildred, this is Michelle from Harbor Light Animal Clinic. I urgently need legal consultation regarding marriage and finances, possible infidelity, transfers from joint accounts to a third party, and procedures for requesting DNA testing. Attached are 2 initial pieces of evidence. I want to proceed lawfully and quietly until I have a complete file. Thank you." The send button turned gray. I rested my forehead against the back of my hand. Outside the clinic window, Boston glowed like a chessboard, each lit square a story no one else knows. On the desk, the Justice Plan notebook lay open. I added a new line. "Day of betrayal. 2. The first lie has been recorded. The distance between pity and complicity is just one excuse." I turned off the lights. In the dark, I heard something faint, the sound of trust falling to the bottom of my heart, and I knew, from this moment on, every road would lead to the truth. I barely slept that night. I lay curled on the small sofa in my clinic office, listening to the rain tapping on the roof and the wind slipping through the window frame. At first light, I brewed a strong black coffee, opened my laptop, and began combing through our joint account. Michael still believed I was in California. He had no idea I was less than 10 kilometers away, here in Cambridge, working on a plan taking shape. In the transaction history, a long list of unusual expenses appeared, like puzzle pieces I'd never seen before. Maple Leaf Elementary tuition, $3,800. Kids Planet Toy Store, $215. Happy Moments Birthday Photo Studio, $640. All notes repeated one name, Lisa. I opened my notebook and began building a timeline, Left column for transaction dates, right column for the excuses Michael had given. Business trips. September 12th. White teddy bear. Meeting investor in New York. November 4th. Maple Leaf tuition. Trip to Dallas. December 21st. Birthday photo shoot. Year-end meeting in Chicago. Each line matched chillingly. For 4 years, every night I stayed up saving the lives of helpless creatures. He was raising another family. With the money I earned. Near noon, my phone buzzed. A reply from Mildred Harper, the lawyer I had emailed the night before. "Michelle, I've reviewed your materials. This is a clear case of infidelity and financial abuse. Do not confront him yet. Keep gathering evidence, statements, transfers, invoices, every expense. I recommend preparing a divorce petition and a DNA test request. Stay calm, keep him unaware. Justice takes time, but we will get it." I read the email 3 times, then typed back. "Understood. I'll gather more over the next few days. He won't suspect a thing until it's too late." 30 minutes later, I sent Michael a short message, setting the next piece in motion. "I'm back in Boston. Tired, but okay. I think I'll stay home for a few days before returning to work." Within 5 minutes, he replied, "So happy to hear that. I'll come home early tonight. I want to make things right, Michelle." I looked at the screen. A faint smile crossed my face. He still thought I'd just arrived. He had no idea I'd seen everything. That evening, Michael came home earlier than usual. He brought tulips, the flowers I used to love, but now only felt like a chokehold. He smiled, wrapped his arms around me from behind. His cologne hadn't changed, familiar enough to make my chest ache. "I'm sorry I haven't been more attentive," he whispered. "You've been so tired. What if we took a weekend in Maine?" I turned to him, smiling lightly, voice calm as air. "Sounds nice. I could use a break, too." He took my hand, looked deep into my eyes, and I saw a man who could act down to the last detail. I only nodded. I had to pretend. Mildred's advice echoed. Don't confront him without enough evidence. While he showered, I opened my phone, captured the latest bank statement, and emailed it to Mildred. In the notes, I typed, "This month shows a new $5,200 transfer to account HM. Coincides with Maple Leaf tuition. Likely Tiffany Morgan." I saved a copy, turned off the screen. Michael stepped out of the bathroom, hair still damp, wearing that familiar half-smile, the smile that once made me love him and now left me hollow. "Thank you for believing in me," he said. "I promise everything will be okay." I only nodded. That night, while he slept, I lay still, phone glowing under the covers, and wrote one more line in the justice plan. He says he loves me with words. But he pays for another love. And money doesn't lie. Outside the window, Boston's rain returned. In the soft yellow glow of the lamp, I looked at the man lying beside me and knew that from now on, every breath he took was part of my plan. 3 days later, Michael told me to dress up for his firm's fundraiser, a high-profile event for major investors in the financial sector. He said it was a chance for us to show up as a couple again after such a busy time. And I understood instantly. He needed the mask of a happy marriage. I chose a fitted long black dress, paired with the ivory silk shawl he'd gifted me for our 3rd anniversary. Everything was curated, from outfit to smile. As we stepped into the grand lobby of the Fairmont Copley, hundreds of crystal glasses sparkled under golden chandeliers, soft jazz weaving between murmured conversations. He placed his hand on my back and whispered, "You've always been the best part of my life." I smiled faintly. A good liar always sweetens the blade. The event began. Michael mingled with groups of guests, shaking hands, laughing, proudly introducing me. "This is Michelle, my biggest supporter through every step of my career." Everyone looked at us like a perfect couple. I smiled politely, listening quietly, feeling the invisible cracks beneath the polished surface. And then I saw her. Tiffany, in a pale violet dress, her hair softly curled, wearing a silver star brooch. She entered the hall like a guest of honor, name badge in hand. "Tiffany Morgan, community education consultant." I nearly laughed. Consultant? She had just been promoted in Michael's new narrative, his sponsored project. Michael saw her, and for a split second, their eyes met. Something electric passed between them, long enough for me to recognize a look he never gave me. She nodded. He gave a subtle nod back. But just minutes later, they clinked glasses and exchanged a warm smile, the kind shared by two people who've known more than wine. I held my champagne glass, stepped toward the back of the hall, and gently opened my purse. Beneath tissues and lipstick, my phone was recording. I aimed the camera in their direction, pretending to check messages while it captured every second of Michael and Tiffany's interaction, the smile of two people who knew exactly who they were deceiving. I didn't drink another drop. I just stood there, watching, reminding myself, sometimes justice doesn't come from courtrooms, but from the moments people think no one's watching. When the event ended, Michael held my hand, flashes going off around us. "Thank you for being with me tonight," he said. I answered softly, "That's what a wife's supposed to do, right?" He nodded, not realizing that sentence was double-edged. That night, after he fell asleep, I pulled out my phone, plugged it in, and replayed the 2-minute video. In the glowing light of the ballroom, Michael and Tiffany's faces were clear. Their eyes, their distance, their smiles, all spoke the truth. I clipped a short segment, emailed it to Mildred with a brief note. First piece of evidence. The screen blinked. Sent successfully. I stared at those words for a long time, then closed the laptop. Outside the window, city lights reflected on the glass, casting my shadow back at me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I was coming back, not as a wife, but as the woman rewriting her own justice. The next morning, I arrived at Mildred's office in downtown Boston. A light rain was falling, mist veiling Beacon Street like a gray curtain. I walked in, carrying the USB drive with the footage from last night's fundraiser. Mildred was waiting in her small office full of divorce files, her gaze firm yet full of empathy. I sat down, my hands still cold, but my voice steady. "I'm ready now, Mildred." "Enough is enough." She nodded, plugged the USB in, and watched the short video. The glow of the screen lit up her stern face. After a few silent seconds, she said slowly, "This is more than clear. We'll begin divorce proceedings immediately, and I want you to request a DNA test to confirm that child is Michael's. If so, he can be charged with concealing a dependent and financial misrepresentation." I listened to every word, like hearing the war drums at the start of a true battle. That same morning, Mildred helped me file the official divorce petition with the Suffolk County Court. The packet was over 10 pages long, with all evidence attached: bank statements, transfers, receipts, the video. I signed my name at the bottom, my pen shaking slightly, but the stroke resolute. That afternoon, Mildred contacted the Massachusetts Child Support Enforcement Agency, reporting suspicions of Michael hiding a child, an act subject to civil charges and severe penalties. I sat across from her, watching each fax go out, my heart pounding yet strangely relieved. Every sheet sent peeled back another layer of his mask. But Mildred knew that to win, I'd need more than paperwork, visual evidence. She referred me to Joseph Turner, a private investigator she'd worked with on high-stakes financial divorce cases. That afternoon, we met at a small cafe near the Charles River. Joseph was in his 40s, tall, quiet, eyes sharp as blades. After my brief summary, he asked only one question. "What level of evidence are you after? Suspicion or certainty?" I answered clearly, "Certainty, and legal." 2 days later, I received an email from Joseph. Subject line, "Initial observations." He wrote concisely, with attached photos and a detailed report. Michael left his office at least 3 times this week during lunch, around 12:10 to 1:45 p.m. He drove to Riverview Place Apartments in Somerville, where Tiffany Morgan resides. He parked in the garage and went up to apartment 307. He stayed about an hour and a half, then returned to work by 2 p.m., as if coming back from a client lunch. I opened each photo. Undeniable. Michael stepping out of his car, holding a paper bag from a nearby bakery, smiling as Tiffany opened the door. Pictures of them leaving the unit together, her walking him to the parking lot, brushing his shoulder before he walked away. Joseph concluded, "The visits are consistent every Tuesday and Thursday." This constitutes repeated infidelity. I stared at the images, no longer in pain, only cold and resolved. The man who said he was meeting clients had been spending lunch breaks cheating. I saved all the photos to the Justice Plan folder, carefully numbered. That night, I sent them all to Mildred, along with this note. "Mildred, here is direct evidence. He meets Tiffany twice a week during lunch. Enough for court." Her response came almost instantly. "Good. I'll prepare the supplemental file. From now on, Michelle, every step you take is protected by law. We won't fight with pain anymore, but with evidence." I looked out the window. The Boston sunset reflected off the Charles River, staining the sky red. I breathed deep and whispered to myself, "He once used time to hide his lies. I'll use every minute now to bury them." The next morning, Michael left early as usual. He kissed my cheek, said he had an important meeting. I simply nodded, silently watching him fade out the door. Once I heard his car pull away, I reached for my phone. I opened my contacts, saw his name on screen, then called. My voice was so calm, it surprised even me. "Can we meet this afternoon?" "At River Bean Cafe, near your office. I want to talk." There was a pause on his end. Then he replied, as gently as ever, "Sure. But why not wait till tonight and talk at home? You just got back. I want to cook dinner for you." I smiled, keeping my tone flat. "No need. I prefer talking outside. Too many things at home keep us from saying what we really mean." He hesitated a second, then agreed. "All right." I want us to talk seriously, too. That afternoon, I arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a window seat where sunlight streamed across my steaming cappuccino. I sat quietly, opened my bag, double-checked the evidence on my phone. When Michael walked in, wearing a white shirt and navy tie, the same smile on his face, it was as if nothing had ever happened. He kissed my forehead, a gesture that once thrilled me, now cold as glass. We sat. He talked about new projects, maybe starting his own fund. I let him speak, let him settle into his polished husband role. When he paused, I slid my phone across the table, opened a video file. On screen appeared a dim shot of our living room. Yellow lights, a birthday cake, and a child's voice rang clearly. "Daddy?" Then Michael's voice, tender and sweet to the bone. I'll always be here. Michael froze. He stared at the screen, then at me, face draining of color. Michelle, when did you film this? I didn't answer. I set down my cup, voice low and steady. That night. When you blew out candles with another woman's child. In my house. He swallowed hard, tried to steady his tone. That was Lisa. You know her. Tiffany asked me to watch her sometimes. I said that to comfort the girl. I didn't want her feeling unloved. Michelle, she doesn't deserve to be hurt. I laughed, but it came out sharp as broken glass. Doesn't deserve to be hurt? You're saying that to me? Do you know what truly doesn't deserve pain, Michael? A wife's trust. I took an envelope from my bag, unfolded documents. Teddy bear receipt dated September 12th, Maple Leaf tuition statements, transfer proof to Tiffany Morgan, and the photo from the fundraiser where he toasted with her in the hotel lobby. I laid each one on the table, voice even and cold. Here's the tuition you paid. Here's the toy you bought on the day you said you were in New York. And here, the moral man, toasting with his mistress at a company event. He couldn't speak. I saw his throat twitch, hands shaking as he stared at the evidence. Finally, he lowered his head, voice rough. I'm sorry. Michelle, I messed up. I was stupid, cowardly. I didn't know it would go this far. It's all my fault, mine alone. I looked at him, no longer the man who was once my whole world, but just someone who had lost the game he rigged. I said softly, eyes fixed on my cooling coffee. You have 24 hours to leave the house. After that, my attorney will contact you. Don't try to appeal to emotion anymore, Michael. I have proof, and I have the law. He looked up, eyes drained, not angry, just a man who'd lost everything. I stood, placed cash on the table, and said quietly, without looking back, Thank you. Because of you, I learned how to trust myself. I walked out, leaving behind a man bowed in silence. Outside, the wind stirred, coffee scent mingling with autumn leaves. I opened my phone and texted Mildred. It's done. He confessed, ready for the next step. I turned off the screen, stood to leave. But just as my hand touched the door, Michael's voice called from behind, no longer trembling or regretful, but cold and bitter. If you think you can take me down that easily, you're wrong. I'll hire the best attorney in Boston. That house, your clinic, they're marital assets. You won't keep anything. I paused a second, turned to face him. His eyes no longer held guilt, but fear of losing control. I replied softly, but loud enough. Then try me, Michael. This time, the law is on my side. I turned, pushed open the door, and stepped out. Behind me, his heavy breathing dissolved into the cold wind. Outside, Boston was foggy, the streetlights reflecting off the Charles like 1,000 mirrors, revealing a woman who had just stopped being afraid. That evening, the house was eerily quiet. After the confrontation at the cafe, Michael hadn't dared return. I sat in front of my computer with only the ticking wall clock and the soft rain brushing against the window as company. I opened the browser, the cursor blinking in the search box. Boston Women's Forum, Marriage and Family section. I logged in with an anonymous account named The Vet's Wife. With trembling fingers, I typed, not with rage, but with the stillness of someone who had seen everything. My husband is a successful man in finance. He speaks of ethics, trust, and family, all while secretly betraying me for 4 years with the woman he called his best friend. They have a child together, while I was still clinging to the belief that our marriage could be saved. I'm not looking for pity. I just want other women to know, when a man says he's meeting a client, sometimes he's just with someone else. I reread the post, then hit submit. Within minutes, hundreds of views. An hour later, over 5,000. Comments poured in. Women sharing similar stories, words of support, others outraged on my behalf. One wrote, "Is he with Brightfield Capital? I heard of a CEO who preaches ethics but lives a lie." Another chimed in, "Sounds like Michael R., always speaking at those investment seminars." If it's him, what a fraud I didn't reply. I just watched the comments scroll by, feeling both chilled and liberated. I didn't need to name him. The truth was speaking for itself. By morning, the post had spread to Twitter and Reddit. From an anonymous story, it had become a hot topic in Boston's finance circles. Memes mocking the hashtag #ThePerfectCEO flooded timelines. Quotes from Michael's talks on professional integrity were turned into jokes. By noon, I got a message from Tiffany. "Michelle, please. Stop. I'm about to be suspended. The school is investigating. Lisa is still a child. She'll be hurt. Please think of her." I read it, then locked my phone. I didn't hate Tiffany, but I owed her nothing. They chose this path. I was just shining a light where they tried to keep it dark. That same afternoon, Mildred called. Her voice was calm but pleased. "Michelle, the news is spreading faster than I thought. Brightfield's investors are demanding an internal audit. They want to know how much Michael spent on undocumented expenses. Shall I submit the bank statements?" I replied quietly, "Do it. I want it all out in the open." That night, Michael came home. His shirt wrinkled, tie loose. He threw his keys on the table, eyes frantic. "What did you do, Michelle?" "The office is a mess. Investors are threatening to pull out. Do you want me to lose everything?" I looked at him, expression steady, unshaken. "No, Michael. I didn't do anything. You did." 4 years ago, he fell silent, bit his lip, and walked out. The door clicked shut, leaving only his fading cologne in the air. I sat down, opened my anonymous post. Over 12,000 shares. No names needed. All of Boston knew. I opened the Justice Plan notebook and wrote one more line. Sometimes, to expose darkness, you just have to turn on a small light. The glow of the screen lit my face, no longer that of a betrayed wife, but of a woman who had made the liar tremble before the truth. 2 days after the post, I did nothing more. I didn't need to. Once the truth had been revealed, it found its own way forward. I only took calls from Mildred and waited to see how justice would unfold. That morning, Mildred called me from her office. Her voice was firm, tinged with quiet satisfaction. "The court has granted the DNA testing request, Michelle. Preliminary results will be in within 2 weeks. Also, the Child Support Services Agency has issued a temporary freeze on Michael's personal accounts for financial obligation verification. I've also submitted the statements you gave me. The transfers to Tiffany will definitely be investigated." I listened, filled with a strange calm. "Thank you, Mildred." At last, the law is beginning to speak. That afternoon, I stopped by Maple Leaf Elementary, where Tiffany teaches. I wasn't there to confront her, only to leave an anonymous envelope in the principal's mailbox. Inside was a printed copy of the now viral article, along with a handwritten note. "A teacher at this school may be involved in an ethical scandal that could affect the institution's reputation. No signature was needed." I just walked away, quietly, as if I had never been there. That evening, the first message arrived. An acquaintance from the parent group wrote to me, "Tiffany got called in by the principal. She's panicking, might be suspended." I read it without trembling. I wasn't seeking revenge. I simply stopped protecting a lie. The next morning, the media started picking up the story. The headline on Boston Finance Weekly read, Brightfield Capital faces ethical crisis. Senior fund manager accused of misconduct and personal scandal. Beneath it was a picture of Michael in a suit, smiling confidently at an investment conference. The comments below the article were merciless. Ethical investing, hypocritical living, the paradox of modern Wall Street. If he couldn't keep his wife's trust, how can he manage our money? That afternoon, Mildred sent me a photo of an internal memo from Brightfield Capital. The board has decided to suspend Mr. Michael R., senior portfolio manager, pending audit and internal investigation. I read the words suspend from duty twice, then smiled. Finally, someone is holding him accountable, I whispered. That night, Tiffany sent me another message, longer than any before. Michelle, you've won. I've lost everything. Please, I'm begging you, stop. Lisa's not at fault. I just want to raise my child in peace. I stared at the screen, not responding. There was no need to. Society, public opinion, and justice were finishing what I had started. When I closed the laptop, I reopened my Justice Plan notebook. The final line of the day, I wrote in small, steady script. When justice begins to work, I don't need to scream. I just need to stand still and let the truth speak for me. Outside, the autumn wind swept through the window frame, carrying the scent of light rain and the distant echo of car horns. Boston had never felt so peaceful, at least not to me. 3 weeks later, with the scandal still making headlines, I decided it was time to close the chapter. Not with silence, but with truth made public. I booked a table at the Grand Ivy, a restaurant by the Charles River, where we once celebrated our 3rd wedding anniversary. This dinner wasn't just a gathering of friends. It was my final trial, one where justice didn't lie in a judge's hands, but in the eyes of those who had once believed in us. I sent invitations to our closest mutual friends, and to both Michael and Tiffany. In the note, I kept it brief. This is a farewell dinner. Come if you still believe in the truth. That night, the Grand Ivy banquet hall shimmered in golden light, crystal glasses glittering under chandeliers. I arrived early, wearing a long black dress, hair neatly pinned, makeup soft but sharp. When I looked in the mirror, I no longer saw the woman who cried in the dark. I saw someone who had turned pain into power. One by one, my friends arrived. The Whitleys, Jenny and Mark, a few colleagues from the vet clinic. At last, Michael walked in, Tiffany by his side, their faces tense, trying to maintain composure. I smiled and welcomed guests as if nothing had happened. As dinner neared its end, I rose gently and lifted my glass. Thank you all for coming. Tonight, I won't say much. I just want to share one thing. The truth sometimes needs light, and tonight, I want to shine that light. The room fell silent. I signaled the tech staff. The large screen at the back lit up. The image appeared. The very video I had recorded that night in my own living room. Lisa's voice rang out, innocent and clear. Daddy? Then Michael's, warm and affectionate. I'll always be here. A few gasps. Some covered their mouths. All eyes turned to Michael. But I didn't stop there. I played the DNA results Mildred had sent just yesterday. The test confirms a 99.97% probability of biological relation between Michael R. and Lisa Morgan. The banquet hall was silent. I could hear Tiffany's sharp breaths in the corner. She broke into sobs, her hand trembling as she clutched Michael's arm. He only bowed his head, his face pale. I stepped into the center of the hall, voice steady and clear. 4 years. 4 years of lies, of promises, Of nights I believed you were working late. I don't need an explanation. I just want everyone to see. Justice doesn't always come from courtrooms. Sometimes it comes from ending silence. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then Jenny, who once attended our wedding, stood first. Michelle, I believe you. Then Mark, then the Whitleys. Then one by one, everyone stood, slowly but resolutely. There's no room for betrayal in our circle. Tiffany buried her face, tears soaking the napkin. Michael still didn't lift his head, hands clenched tightly, as if holding on to the last shred of pride. I looked at them one last time and nodded. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. From now on, I hope you two live truthfully with each other, the way I've lived truthfully with myself. I walked out, leaving behind heavy stares, whispered words, and a truth freshly unveiled under the glamorous lights. The breeze off the Charles River brushed gently past, carrying a soft chill. I stood on the steps, breathing deep. Behind me, an old chapter was collapsing. Ahead, a new one was opening. No more lies, only light and freedom. 3 days after the evening at the Grand Ivy, the storm officially broke. The news spread faster than Michelle had imagined. On financial media sites, bold headlines emerged. Brightfield Capital under internal investigation amid ethics scandal and alleged embezzlement. At the Brightfield office, the tension was palpable. David Clark, a longtime partner and head of auditing, discovered irregularities in spending. In an internal email, he wrote, "A sum of $120,000 was withdrawn from the contingency fund 3 months ago, without valid invoices. Upon review, the transaction was made by Michael R., labeled as Maple Leaf Community Project Support. But David didn't take long to connect Maple Leaf to the elementary school where Tiffany Morgan teaches. He immediately contacted Mildred, Michelle's attorney, to verify the connection. When cross-referenced with Michelle's evidence, tuition receipts, bank transfers, gifts, and aligned expenditures, everything became alarmingly clear. Michael had embezzled company funds to support his mistress and their child. Mildred forwarded the entire case file to Brightfield's Audit Division and the Massachusetts Financial Oversight Committee. Within 48 hours, Brightfield Capital released a public statement. We have terminated Mr. Michael R., Senior Portfolio Manager, for serious breaches of ethical and financial conduct. His personal accounts have been frozen pending investigation. Authorities are proceeding with prosecution. As for Tiffany Morgan, after her suspension, she was officially dismissed from Maple Leaf Elementary for seriously damaging the school's reputation. She packed her desk in silence, her face gaunt, while colleagues avoided eye contact as she walked the hallway. Meanwhile, Michelle visited her lawyer's office. She signed the divorce papers, the final page ending 8 years of marriage. The court awarded her full ownership of the Cambridge home and the Harbor Light Animal Clinic. Michael didn't contest. Perhaps he knew he no longer had the right. A few days later, the Child Support Agency issued its official ruling. Mr. Michael R. is ordered to reimburse all past expenses and provide ongoing financial support for the child Lisa Morgan. Per Massachusetts state law, Mildred informed Michelle that the case had been referred to the Bureau of Financial Investigations for embezzlement and fraud. The proposed sentence could reach up to 6 years in prison. That evening, Michelle returned home, sitting in the empty kitchen. The soft yellow light fell across the wooden table, once the setting for dinners, stories, and laughter. She opened her laptop and read the latest headline. Former Brightfield Fund Manager faces embezzlement charges. Estimated losses at $120,000. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. No more tears, no more shaking. Only peace, the kind found by those who have weathered the storm and remained standing. Justice begins with truth, she whispered. The wind whispered through the window, carrying the chill of Boston's November air. Michelle looked outside. The sky still dark, but in the distance, streetlights shimmered on the surface of the Charles River, sparkling like a quiet promise that even the deepest darkness must one day give way to light. 5 weeks later, I sat in my new office, a small but sunlit space, where the nameplate had just gone up a few weeks ago. Phoenix Divorce Solutions. The name Phoenix was not just a symbol of rebirth. It was my story. Someone once burned by betrayal, who had learned to rise from her own ashes. Mildred, the woman who had stood by me when everything collapsed, was now my official partner. We started this firm to help women reclaim their financial rights and dignity through legal counsel, asset management, and psychological therapy. Every day, I met new faces. A middle-aged woman clutching bank statements her husband had controlled. A young mother holding her child, her eyes lost but resilient. I saw myself in them. Women who once thought justice was a luxury until they learned how to claim it. One afternoon, I was invited to speak at the Women's Financial Freedom Conference, an event bringing together hundreds of women, lawyers, entrepreneurs, and social activists. As I stood on stage, the spotlight on me, I saw eyes looking up, expectant, empathetic, trusting. I began. There was a time I believed justice meant making others pay. But then I realized true justice is when you get yourself back, when pain no longer controls you, but becomes the strength to lift others. The applause was long and warm. Mildred smiled from the front row, nodding gently, a silent blessing. 2 months later, I heard Michael had been sentenced to 6 years in prison for embezzlement and financial fraud. He was stripped of all authority in the investment world, lost his reputation, lost everything he once took pride in. As for Tiffany, after being fired from the school, she moved back in with her parents in suburban Worcester, unable to find new work. I didn't feel joy, nor sadness. It was simply a natural consequence, the result of choices they had made. As for me, I returned to the simple life I had once forgotten. On weekends, I visited the Animal Rescue Center in Cambridge, where it all began. I adopted 3 abandoned animals, an old Labrador, a limping corgi, and a black cat named Midnight. I cared for them, played with them, and sometimes smiled at the thought that by saving these small lives, I was saving myself. In the late afternoon, as the sun dipped behind flaming red trees, I sat by the window, watching people pass by. A hot cup of tea on the table, 3 animals curled up beneath my feet. I thought to myself, justice doesn't end with punishment. It ends with peace. And for me, peace had begun. On an early winter morning, the season's first snow fell gently on the glass roof of the Cambridge Rescue Center. I stopped by as usual, but today, a special soul caught my attention. A small golden-haired dog, blind, yet still lifting its head at every sound. They said it had been rescued from the wildfires in California the year before, during the same time I was there on a work trip. They hadn't named it yet, but I simply smiled and said, "Her name is Hope." As I held Hope in my arms, I felt my heart beat with a new rhythm, no longer heavy, but light as breath. She trembled in my hands, seeking warmth, and I realized I had once been just like her, lost in darkness, guided only by the feeling in my chest. I brought Hope home, settling her beside the 3 other little creatures. They curled around her, as if they understood that here, no one had anything left to fear. That afternoon, while reorganizing my office, I found a small box high on the shelf. Inside was the silver necklace I had once planned to give Michael for our 8th anniversary. I held it for a long moment, then hung it on the wall beside my desk. In the dim light, the silver glinted like a quiet reminder. Beneath it, I carved into a wooden plaque. Loyalty belongs only to honesty. That night, I opened my justice plan notebook again. The pages were filled with handwritten notes, evidence, statements, old tears, all now lying silent before me. I turned to the last page and wrote a single line, short but enough to close the journey. I didn't lose everything. I only lost an illusion. I closed the notebook and placed it on the shelf. Outside, the wind brushed past the window, carrying the sounds of ordinary life, traffic, laughter, hope softly barking in her sleep. And I knew my life had truly begun again. 3 months later, on a Sunday morning, I took Hope for a walk in the public garden. The sky was clear, the sunlight dancing on the lake. As I fastened Hope's leash near a bench, a voice softly called from behind. "Michelle?" I turned. Tiffany stood there, gaunt, her face thinner, her eyes both shy and uncertain. Beside her was Lisa, now 5, her blonde hair in loose curls. The child smiled at me, innocent, untouched by the mistakes of adults. Lisa ran forward and pointed at Hope. "You know my daddy?" I knelt down, gently smiled, and brushed her hair. "I used to know someone, but now I know peace." Tiffany stood still, tears running silently down her cheeks. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry. I lost everything, and I know you never wanted that. I just wanted to say thank you for not destroying me the way I did to you." I looked at her for a long moment, my voice soft as the breeze. "I never wanted anyone to suffer, Tiffany. I just needed peace. The rest, each of us has to face what we've sown." Tiffany nodded, took Lisa's hand, and walked away. I watched them go. No hatred, no pity, only a sadness light as dust in the sun. That afternoon, my sister Rebecca called. "You know Michael's working as a waiter now, downtown. Tiffany's tutoring privately." "Life has its ways of teaching people," I answered softly, a faint smile on my lips. "No one needs to suffer, Rebecca. I just needed peace. That's enough." I looked at Hope, curled up by my feet, and thought, maybe forgiveness isn't forgetting. Maybe it's finally laying down what's become too heavy to carry. A few months later, I was invited to speak on the popular podcast, Women Who Rise. That day's topic, Women and Rebirth After Betrayal. I sat before the microphone, warm yellow lights shining down, the host's voice calm and kind. "Michelle, if you could say just one thing to the women listening right now, what would it be?" I smiled, looking straight into the recorder. Betrayal doesn't end you. It only ends the illusion of who you trusted. The only thing that truly ends a woman is when she stops believing in herself. The room was silent for a few seconds. Then the host gently placed a hand on my shoulder and nodded. Final scene. That evening, I walked Hope along the banks of the Charles River. The sunset glowed warm orange, mirrored on the water. Hope walked slowly beside me, ears low, cautious but steady. Like me, step by step, finding direction in a new world. The breeze passed by, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and the distant chime of church bells. I looked up and smiled, not because the past was gone, but because it no longer defined me. Justice begins with truth. Peace begins when you forgive yourself. The screen faded to black, leaving only the reflection of sunset on water and the image of Michelle and Hope continuing their walk toward the light. If this story touched you, Please click like so more women can find it. And don't forget to subscribe, so together we can spread real journeys where justice isn't just a verdict, but the peace we reclaim for ourselves.